while it does do a lot of goofy little things bad, there is like 100 times more that it does better than Dark Souls 1. Just absolutely better.
Hmm.
There's so many new mechanics, so many new things to engage with, so many environmental things you can do, unique locations that have interesting things that are specific to that location, whether it's a covenant or just something interactable about that environment. And you don't get that in Dark Souls 1 or Dark Souls 3 or Elden Ring. None of them have the level of interactivity of Dark Souls 2, where there's special hidden secrets all throughout the land, right? You get a special item for beating the game without hitting bonfires. You get a special item for beating the game, what is it, without dying. And even like killing the pigs in Majula, how it causes the larger ones to spawn after you take them all out, and then the largest one, right? Just little secrets like that are hidden throughout the entire game. If you kill, what is his name? The samurai boss. It's been that long. Um, in the DLC, you kill him without taking a hit. He kills himself. He stabs himself. You don't get that kind of stuff in the other games.
Oh,
Like
Sir
where there's,
Alone.
yeah, Sir Alone. Yeah,
Yeah, you do make a good point because see the secrets in Eldering. Yeah, Eldering obviously has secrets, but they're not really that memorable. At least in my
there's
opinion.
yeah,
Um,
the most secret thing you'll get is like a locational secret, but it's something
yeah,
that eventually everyone's gonna find. But Dark Souls 2, there's things that you won't find unless you do something very specific, and that's
yeah.
not the case really in Elden Ring. Unless you're talking about like quest lines and stuff, but let's be honest, most people are going to actively seek how to finish that, like with the internet
And
because it's for achievements.
man, as big as Elden Ring is, I am very surprised how very little of those little fine secrets that Dark Souls 2 had wasn't in there. Um,
Yeah.
and before the game came out, I was like, if the game's going to have spirit summons, I think they should have other, um, possibilities in terms of puzzle solving. And when the entire playthrough, I didn't see anything until I found this jellyfish and with a door, and it didn't unlock until I summoned a jellyfish, and that's what I
Yeah.
wanted. But that was I don't know if there's anything else like that because it's just not scattered throughout the game, and I just wish that they would have applied more of that. That way, I could actually use spirit summons because obviously I don't use them in combat, but
Yeah.
it would have been a lot more fun and more intriguing if I could like just keep some on hand just in case I run into a puzzle that I got to figure out what spirit I need to open up this door, and stuff like that. Just would have been nice, but it's just a severe lack of.
Yeah, no, that's actually a really good point. Just like having interactivity with the summons, right? Like the one, that was a nice surprise. I like the jellyfish thing. It was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing else like that as far as the summons go.
Yeah, it's just there's a lot of almosts in Elden Ring. I always like to
Yeah.
quote. I don't know if you've seen that movie Apocalypto, and the one of the villains names the protagonist almost because he almost got away.
Yeah.
And that's what I like to view Elden Ring as is just kind of almost. It's almost amazing with its aspects, but it's just kind of they give you a
Yeah.
little bit and then they just kind of I don't know. They just take it away.
Yeah. When Sekiro released, I was my hope when Sekiro released because it's a single player game, right? And it's pretty one directional. I was like, okay, this is a side project. They're gonna be coming out with something like Dark Souls, something big. They gotta
Mm-hmm.
be, right? And I had this hope in my head that it was gonna be like an amalgamation of them all the Souls games, where they take the best of it. And I was hoping it'd be something open world. And not only that, I was hoping it would have dungeons and stuff because it's something I've always wanted. Like, going back to like Oblivion, Elder Scrolls and stuff, right? You have open worlds that have dungeons and things you can find and story quests and whatever. And I was hoping they'd head a little more in that direction. And even have dungeons that are like almost impossible for your average player, right? Where it's extremely difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And when Elden Ring got released and it, revealed and everything, it was being pretty much that. It was almost that to a T from appearances, right? But once I got my hand on the game, it was nowhere near what I was hoping it was, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is there to do in the game? Kill stuff, talk to pretty shallow NPCs, honestly. Like, everything is just focused around this one overarching goal in the game. Like, there's nothing outside of that, right? Like, everything focuses on the Elden Ring, like, that's it. There's no like little subplots going on that are interesting other than things that also tie into that, right? It just
Hmm.
doesn't feel like a real world at all. And I feel like Dark Souls 2 even did better at that because at least it had Majula, it had a little town and people that felt like people just in the world with their own little practices and professions,
What's
their
your?
own.
Oh, sorry.
Hmm? What were you gonna ask?
Oh, I was wondering what your thoughts are on the criticism about the Iron Key being in the air.
Oh, okay. So that even goes back to Dark Souls 1, right? Dark
Hmm.
Souls 1 has areas like where you can see another area, right? And it seems like it's so far away or it's so close, but it's not, right? It's just a distant background image, pretty much. Like it's just a,
Right.
right? And that's normal, right?
Hmm.
Um, Games, you can't expect them to make everything in scale all the time, especially if they're trying to like save on resources and time, right? Especially with development. So Dark Souls 2 having gone through development hell, which is beyond their control, right? It is.
Hmm.
So them going through that, having something where you have to ride this long elevator to get there, right? The elevator is twofold, right? One, that's so they can load it, but two, it's also so they can give an excuse as to why the hell it's so different when you get there. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like you're in a totally different place, and that's kind of cool. I loved that.
Yeah.
I loved riding this elevator, coming up and being like, "Whoa, this is different. Like this is a whole different world. What the heck?" It was sweet. I love that. Like in Dark Souls 3, when you're traveling through the land, you can see everything in the distance, everywhere you're going to be in the future from High Wall, right? From Lothric. You can see out and you can see the end of the game pretty much, right?
Hmm.
And you go down and you end up having to go through the caves, right? In the catacombs. And when you do that, you're down there and you're going through, right? You come out the other side and you can look back and see where you were, right?
Hmm.
And Dark Souls 1 and 2, you can kind of do that same thing, but obviously none of it's to scale. Like even in Dark Souls 3, like none of what you're seeing when you look back is to scale. It never was. And people put like too much value on the criticisms for Dark Souls 2 just because it did start with a really rough, Dark Souls 2 when it launched was pretty rough. Let's be honest, right? The frame rate wasn't good, nothing about it was good. The graphics were not what they were presented to be. The game was hyped up through marketing because of Bandai Namco to be something it wasn't. A whole lot of stuff happened, right?
Hmm.
And I understand why people attack it so harshly now, but like there's things that are brought up that are like hated about Dark Souls 2 where does it really affect the game? Like does that elevator when you ride it make the game bad? Do you just go, "Oh man, this elevator just no." Like while you're riding the elevator, you're like, "Oh, I wonder where I'm gonna end up." You know, the first time you're playing it, right? You're like, "Where am I going? What's gonna happen?" Then you end up in this fire-ish hell place that you're not expecting, right?
Hmm.
I think that's super cool. I loved it. But I feel like people become jaded and they don't really realize like that first impression effect that it has and what its intentions were for an adventure because these games are about adventure, right?
Right.
It's not just about the boss fights. They didn't make Dark Souls so that you could have some intense boss fights and that's it. There's a world, right? A lot of the fun of Dark Souls is exploring the world, it's getting ambushed, it's learning these little tricks that Miyazaki has up his sleeve, right? And they do get stale and worn out, but it's still a staple of the game, right? And even just the normal mobs and NPCs and whatever, they're all important. And I feel like they're still making the normal enemies like detailed and fleshed out, which is good, but they're not like forcing the encounters like they used to. They
Hmm.
just kind of feel slapped all over the place with no real thoughtful level design. Like Elden Ring, the only real good level design would be Stormvale Castle. And I'll say kind of the capital and the sewers. The sewers I think were really good. Uh,
Oh,
the
yes.
capital, the capital's pretty good. It is pretty empty for how big it is and how expansive, and the rewards there aren't that great for what you're doing. Some of the soul rewards and upgrade materials are good, but the actual like gear you find and stuff, it's hit or miss, right?
Hmm.
So that's two good areas, and then you have the academy, right?
Hmm.
Raylucaria Academy. Now that place was really neat, really loved it. Good time. And then
It's,
you have what else? Is there anywhere else that's good?
I love Castle Sol. Or wait, Shaded Castle. That's what I really like.
Yeah, yeah. I do like that with all the poison.
Hmm.
Yep.
Now, of
That's
course,
that is one of the only good like level design areas that isn't an actual legacy dungeon, you know?
even though if it's not on the path for a build I'm making, I always make an excuse to go over there because I love it
Yeah.
so much. I'm like, I
Yep.
love the boss, I love the level
Yeah.
design. It's just, I just want it.
Everything about it is good.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun. I like the layout of it, the enemies. I love poison swamps. It's goofy, but I really love it.
Oh
And I
yeah,
don't think they do them dangerously enough. I feel like the poison swamps, they're always too careful.
yeah.
Like Dark
Like,
Souls 1, it was good. It was a good introduction to poison swamps. Dark Souls 2 didn't didn't really do it justice, to be honest. Poison swamps in Dark Souls 2, not very memorable.
uh, well, let's see. They had like a poison mist area.
Yeah, it just there was nothing really that felt like I liked that you had to travel through these little tunnels to like get the loot and stuff in there, and it was okay, but I don't know, there was nothing that great about the poison in Dark Souls 2. I mean, it was cool that you had like the boss fight with Mytha, but you didn't really experience the poison if you found out about the windmill, which most people did. It was fun the first time I fought her because I didn't know about it, so I had to deal with poison, I had to prepare, and it made the fight more intense, but I don't know, for long term, there just isn't much there. Dark Souls 3, I loved Dark Souls 3 at first, man. Like I still do. I think Dark Souls 3 is awesome. The the poison, well, first off you get to the swamp, right, which is probably my favorite Dark Souls map just for its aesthetics and PvP. When you get to the swamp, you got like the crabs and everything, right? It's just I don't know, there's so much to explore, so much danger in every corner, things to find. And then you go down and you have the poison swamp, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have these giant towering dinosaur Godzilla looking things, right? And you got all this stuff that's like dangerous and the poison is like, you know, far, far off in the distance and you can't really see and you have to slowly trudge through it. That was better, right? I really enjoyed that. I still think that it didn't poison you enough. I feel like it should have been more dangerous. I
Mm-hmm.
feel it about all the poison swamps because it's like that doesn't really give you an incentive to use the poison moss or to plan, right? Like you do your first time instinctively because you don't know your way around, but I end up never really using those materials that often because it's like if you play it carefully, they just don't really come in handy.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a shame. And with Elden Ring, they made it a point to make the poison swamps less meaningful and to make them less hazardous, and they included them, but meaninglessly. Like you just ride Torrent and they're gone and negates
Yeah.
them. Then you have the Scarlet Rot in the underground, and it's like it's kind of okay, but it's just one big square, you know? It's like one of the most bland environments. There's nothing. There's just really lazy walls all around the outside and a little bit of random stuff splashed in between. And it's kind of a shame. I just feel like now that's where Castle Soul or what is it?
A shaded castle.
Shaded Castle. That's where that was good. That was the best poison environment in there, but it's still the poison itself wasn't strong enough. It was just kind of like oh, it's here, you know, but it didn't really interact with the enemies in a way where I was like, this is dangerous, you know, it never was the life or death, you know, there
Yeah.
was always somewhere to fight where I felt safe,
I don't, I
which
don't,
is good.
I don't know if you can tell, but I love Commander Nile. But
Yeah,
I really wish the castle was better. The castle is like it's half good and half really bad. And I'm just like,
yeah,
man, I just wish they put a little bit more thought into the design here because it's just not quite there. But I love going
yeah,
there just for Commander Nile, even though I don't really. The only valuable thing from going into the other side of the mountaintop of the giants is just the have that cave where the smithing stone 8 is at. Thank you for listening to this podcast clip. If you want to watch more of the podcast, the full podcast is in the link in the description, along with my guest channel name. And if you would like to guest in a future podcast, please contact me and we shall talk so we can discuss many, many topics, more to come. Other than that, have a glorious day.